The first week of the Overwatch League with the new hero pool system is now in the history books, and with it came a lot to absorb all in a short window of time. Since there was so much that happened, I'd figure I'd spend today's video recording my thoughts on some of the things I noticed in our first week of hero pools. There's plenty to talk about here that could make for good discussion, so don't hesitate to give your own thoughts down in the comment section as well. But let's not waste any more time. Let's begin. To start things off, I'm going to take some time to go over some of the things we noticed composition-wise. Now obviously, since this meta was only a 1 week thing basically, none of this stuff could really matter in the long run. However, it's important to remember that one of these days we could have similar bans in effect that makes these comps viable again. Plus, I think just going over what we saw is fun, so doing this is definitely not a waste of time. Okay, so let's get the big news out of the way first. We saw Soldier 76. That in itself made this weekend incredible. Soldier literally hasn't been viable in well over a year. The last time he was relevant in the Overwatch League was during the first couple of stages in Season 1. I'm not sure how the rest of you felt, but I personally was overjoyed to see Soldier get played again. He's not always the most fun hero in the world to watch, but it's never any fun to see a character get completely neglected for literally years at a time. If you've been a longtime fan of the channel, then you are already well aware that I'm someone who likes to see variation. Since I first started watching pro play back during 2017, I've always had the mindset that this game is the most fun to watch when you have as many viable characters available to you as humanly possible, so you already know that I embrace the sight of Soldier being played with open arms. Along with Soldier, we got to see a few other familiar faces get a bunch of playtime too. We got plenty of Tracer, Sombra, Winston, and even Zen, all of whom are known for having major roles in Dive. It doesn't feel real. With how fast it came and gone, it almost feels as if it's a dream or something. Consistent Dive in 2020. I never thought I'd ever see the day. Seeing the fast-paced play of Tracer and Winston diving a Discord at target is something I have long missed. It was in all honesty a wonderful and nostalgic experience. I was hoping to see more projectile DPS than we saw, but hey, I'm still pretty satisfied regardless. In terms of teams I took notice of the most with Dive, I have to go with Paris, Philly, New York, and Houston. Those guys all really did a great job of adjusting fast to a new meta. I especially wanted to give extra credit to the Eternal and Outlaws. Paris in particular is an interesting case because they got destroyed by Houston, but then within 24 hours they were beating the Fusion. They knew they had to make some fast and furious changes to stand any sort of chance against Philly. Swapping out Benbest for No Smite and Nico for Exi worked like a charm. The team's play seriously seemed to elevate just with those simple substitutions, and I gotta say, Exi and Soon make for one hell of a 1-2 punch in this type of meta. I mean, my goodness. Soon's Tracer plus Exi on Soldier, Sombra, or Hanzo is scary to deal with. Those boys carried, while No Smite's Winston gave the team that needed sustainability that Benbest just clearly couldn't offer them. And how about Houston? They pulled off one of the biggest upsets we've had all year, and they did so in convincing fashion. And yeah, I know Paris looked completely different on day 2 compared to their match on day 1 with the Outlaws, but I still need to give them credit. A 3-0 is a 3-0. They straight up took care of business. It's insane how much of a difference a couple of heroes being banned can end up making for teams. Their fate was completely turned around thanks to their guys being able to stick to their comfort picks. Muma having the chance to consistently play more Winston once again proved to give the Outlaws a huge advantage. My man looks completely different when he's not on Rhine. It's honestly astonishing. He did some great things over the weekend, and it's sure to give the Muma haters a reason to quiet down for the time being. I gotta give some love to the rest of the roster as well though. This was a group effort. First off, I'm really happy for Jexay. Even through all the losses, this man has still found ways to look so good, and I'm really glad to see him finally getting some help. Second, it's good to see Blase continue to look more comfortable on stage. The guy was known for Soldier before he joined the league, and it really showed. The man was on fire, and if it wasn't him or Muma making the plays, then you already know that it was Dante's Tracer or Meko's Diva securing the kills instead. Anytime the meta favors Dive, the Outlaws might be a serious threat to the rest of the league. Don't worry my NYXL and Philly fans though, I did not forget about you, I promise. I have equal praise and interest in you guys too. Starting with New York, they unsurprisingly looked consistently good in their game with the Justice. This type of meta honestly plays up to many of their strengths. The fact that you have 2 amazing Tracer players on your team in Nene and Sabiobi is quite unfair if you ask me. And when you combine that with Mono's Winston and Jonek on his signatures and Yada, it's lights out if you're the opponent. Also, I wanted to give some quick credit out to Animo and Libero. It's not too surprising to see Libero adjust on Sombra since he's always been quite the excellent flex player, but he still does deserve the praise since he looked pretty good. And at at the same time, I wasn't too sure what to expect from Animo on Brig. But like with his bat from last year's playoffs, he once again found a way to get the job done on a hero that is a bit out of his usual comfort zone. Seeing New York in this slightly different variation of dive gave me mixed feelings. On one hand, I got vibes from 2018 with how often they were able to maintain and control the tempo, but at the same time, it felt slightly different. There were still flashes of that patient playstyle, but also hints of aggression we usually don't see from them. It kept the Justice on their toes. Now when looking at the Fusion finally, I know they lost to Paris and all, but I still found myself being impressed. Although they had a rough start in that series, they managed to turn it around with some very clean execution that nearly made Paris pull off a monumental collapse. Although a lot of their players had a pretty up and down day, one guy managed to stay consistent every map, and that man is Carpe. Although Soon gave him all he could handle, Carpe still found ways to keep his team in the game with a dominant Tracer that looked even better than I remember it being. Seeing Alarm play Zen on the Overwatch League stage was also quite the treat. In the first half of the series, he really struggled, as he found himself dying at the hands of Exi or Soon basically anytime he peeked his head around a corner. But in the second half, he came alive and looked more like that guy I remember seeing highlights of from his Contenders days. His second half resurgence sadly wasn't enough to secure a win, but it's okay. Like I said, pretty much everybody on the Fusion had an off day. Look at somebody like Ivy for an example. He showed flashes on the Soldier, yes, but there were other moments where he basically was a non-factor who failed to leave his mark. I don't want to make any assumptions because Paris absolutely deserved to win that game, but I can't help but feel like Philly would have been stronger had Hisu been available to play. Like Carpe, Hisu is a prolific hitscan player, so there's certainly a chance he could have done more for the team than Ivy. Again though, I don't want to make it seem like I'm taking anything away from Paris because I'm not. I'm just curious to know if this lineup change would have made a difference. Regardless though, if this type of meta comes up again in the future, then I'm expecting Philly to be even stronger. Okay, so those are some of the heroes that we saw a majority of the time as well as the teams I took notice of, but the key word to take away there is majority because there was absolutely some variation with comps and it goes beyond simply substituting like a hero or two. Take the Florida Mayhem for an example. For the most part, they took the approach to counter dive instead of running the mirror. They opted to play more Orisa, Ana, Mei, and Hanzo rather than Winston, Zen, Sombra, and Tracer. And on Junkertown, we even saw them go as far as running double shield with a Sigma rather than playing Diva. And it really did work to perfection. Toronto literally had no answer. Florida exploited their weakness of being one-dimensional, plain and simple. Their flexibility gave them the boost they needed to win this match with relative ease after some struggles on Busan. Another team that made use of Orisa bunker comps was the Atlanta Reign. I know they were only playing against Boston, but they still made it work quite nicely. Erster, as usual, played a whole bunch of heroes at a high level. Shout out to him for even breaking out some Junkrat. But unlike the first week we saw Atlanta, we finally got to see the long-anticipated appearance of the DPS prodigy known as Edison. Babybay said they plan to unleash the beast over the weekend, and truer words have never been spoken. His rookie debut was as good as you possibly could have asked for if you support the Reign. He made it look easy with some of the big plays he was making while showing the ability to flex onto a handful of different heroes. I'm excited to see how he does when he takes on a team with a higher skill cap though. He very well could blossom into that superstar level player that Atlanta needs to take the next step. And while we're talking about Boston, I probably should mention that they too opted to stay away from the norm at times. They played a lot of Orisa Sigma, and I for one find it bizarre that Mufin was in when they have a solid Sigma player on the bench in Brucin. I'm assuming it has to do with synergy and maybe comms or something, but I still find it pretty interesting. It's kind of sad, but Boston once again found themselves at the mercy of their opponents. Okay, so this next bit of news doesn't really have to do with hero pools, but I should probably mention what happened with Axiom. So some of you probably noticed that Fusions has been starting in his place lately, and it would seem there's a good reason for that. Earlier today on Twitter, the Uprising announced that Axiom will be taking a leave of absence from the team in order to get some kind of medical procedure done. I can't really confirm what's wrong with him, but it has to be pretty serious if a procedure is required, right? My thoughts and prayers go to Axiom here. I really hope to see him make a full recovery so he can once again be a part of the team before the end of the season. With that said, those are some of the major comps that were played, as well as a handful of the teams and players I took notice of. So now before I wrap up the video, I wanted to take some time to discuss my overall thoughts on the hero pools themselves. So to sum it up, I have pretty mixed feelings. Part of me likes this change, but there's also a side of me that still feels skeptical. Let's start with what I like. So for one, I love how refreshing it can make things feel, depending on who gets banned from week to week. When we see heroes who get played like 80% of the time get banned, things get pretty intense. Week 5 is a prime example of this. No Reinhardt or McCree meant that Winston could seriously be of use, and with there now being no Widow available, it made maps with sniper-dominant sightlines such as Junkertown feel significantly different. And while I do love me some Elite Widow gameplay, it still does feel nice to mix it up once in a while and see what happens when you take her away. Getting rid of a lot of the typical heroes provided this sense of chaos that you would never witness if both teams were accustomed to the meta. Take that final fight on Oasis between Paris and Philly, for example. This is peak Overwatch, and this is only the beginning. More of these types of epic battles are surely on the way. Another plus that comes with hero pools is obviously getting the opportunity to watch long dormant heroes make a triumphant return. It's like what I said at the beginning of the video with Soldier. When you see a character who has been irrelevant for 2 years, things get crazy hype. Then to add on to that, you get Tracer, Winston, and Zen in the mix as well. It's a little sad it'll all be gone next week, but there's always the chance it comes back one day. Keep your fingers crossed, ladies and gentlemen. You never know what could happen. Another thing that makes hero pools so great is that they give teams a chance to play better than they usually would have had the meta still been the same from a few weeks ago. Take the Outlaws, for example. Those guys never would have stood a chance of beating Paris if it weren't for the Week 5 hero pools coming into effect. If you're an Outlaws fan, you should be calling Reinforce and Mr. X the MVPs of the league for eliminating Ryan, Widow, and McCree for you. But in all seriousness, I'm not opposed to giving teams who we'd usually consider basement dwellers more of a fighting chance. Let's call it how it is. Nobody likes to lose, especially when you do it all the time. If a certain meta can change the strength of a team even for just a week, then it helps keep both the players and the fan base a bit happier when they get some big wins once in a while. Signs of life are things that keep us hopeful, and sometimes that hope is just enough to keep us from losing all faith. The final thing I like about hero pools is seeing how well teams can adjust and come up with easily executable strategies on the fly. When you get a week to practice and experiment, you can only do so much. The possibility of showcasing fluid execution decreases by a good margin. Only the teams with the most flexible players and strongest coaching will have a chance of consistently succeeding in this type of system. It's going to be fun to see how the top teams are able to handle something like this. I'm curious to find out just how many of them can avoid a lot of potential upsets. Hero pools test these players to the maximum degree, and only the strong will ultimately be able to break their limits. Now let's switch gears over to the bad. One thing I somewhat dislike is how bad hero pools can screw over a team. Now it should be noted that some of these teams should have signed more flexible players that wouldn't slow them down so much at times, but it still really sucks, you know? Some teams could literally be held back just because management couldn't secure more flexible players at certain positions. Look at the Toronto Defiant. Beast was an obvious weakness in their game against the Mayhem. I don't know if he's just uncomfortable on Orisa or if Toronto didn't really bother practicing comps involving her much, but them being a one-dimensional Winston team made it easy for the Mayhem to make use of counterplay. Instead of challenging Toronto's dive, they just neutralized it instead, and I'm only sure we'll get more examples of this throughout the year. Like I said, part of it lies on the shoulders of the teams for not coaching their guys better and signing players better suited for hero pools, but I still find it somewhat annoying. Another slight issue I've got with hero pools has to do with the ensuing chaos that comes with it. Earlier I mentioned how the disorder is pretty entertaining, but at the same time, I kind of see it as a problem. Do hero pools promote high quality, heart-stopping Overwatch? Yes, but it also keeps you from truly being able to master certain comps. Anytime we get these temporary comps like we did in week 5, it almost feels like a waste. Imagine working so hard to master something just to take it away after a week. It gets rid of that sense of accomplishment for being considered one of the best at a certain meta. The third and final problem I have with hero pools is the drawing selection. I will admit that staying tuned for the post-show to see who gets banned every week is peak entertainment, but the current system can put us in scenarios where we ban these heroes that we probably weren't going to see return anyway in the following week. The first round of hero pools was fine, yeah, but this week was kind of ridiculous. Even though Reinhardt, Widow, and McCree were all set to return, Winston and Soldier still got banned. It honestly feels like a waste, but since they met the pick rate threshold, they were eligible to get banned. Friendly reminder that many heroes like Mei are still in play even after 2 waves of hero pools. The RNG gods are not with us right now, ladies and gentlemen, and that's a problem in itself, right? The randomness of this type of system is fun, but it can also be a curse anytime we get a bad round of bans. Changing things up is super interesting, but at what cost? In some senses, hero pools feels like a double-edged sword. As it currently stands, I still lean more towards them being good. Right now, I'd say there's still more advantages than disadvantages, but my opinion could definitely change as the season continues to progress. And with that being said, this concludes some of the things I noticed about the first week of Overwatch League hero pools. Are there any details you think I should have touched on that I didn't get to in this video? If so, let me know down in the comment section. Tell me what you noticed. And if you enjoyed today's content, make sure to hit that like button and sub to my channel if you haven't already done so. And if you're interested in supporting me beyond my content alone, then consider purchasing a channel membership, joining my Discord server, or following me on Twitter. And as always, thanks so much for watching today's video. I really do appreciate it. And until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Bye.